Welcome to Kristina Motivational Channel. The story of Angulimala. Once upon a time in ancient India, there was a bright young man named Ahimsaka, which means innocent. Ahimsaka was born into a respected Brahmin family and was a diligent student, well-liked by his teachers. His exceptional abilities and dedication earned him the admiration of many. However, his brilliance also sparked jealousy among his fellow students. They conspired to turn their teacher against him. Influenced by their deceit, the teacher, once fond of Ahimsaka, began to distrust him and sought to rid himself of the young man. He devised a sinister plan and told Ahimsaka that to complete his education, he must bring him a garland of 1,000 human fingers. Driven by his respect for his teacher and the belief that this task was necessary, Ahimsaka reluctantly embarked on a gruesome mission. He turned into a fearsome bandit, ambushing travelers and cutting off their fingers. His transformation into the notorious Angulimala, or Garland of Fingers, was complete, and his name became synonymous with terror. The villagers lived in constant fear, praying for salvation from this ruthless killer. One day, Buddha was traveling through the region and heard of the terror Angulimala was causing. Ignoring the warnings of the villagers, Buddha decided to confront the bandit. As he walked through the dense forest, he came face to face with Angulimala. Seeing Buddha, Angulimala was filled with rage and a desire to claim his finger. He drew his sword and started running toward Buddha, but no matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up with the serene monk. Exhausted and frustrated, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, monk, stop!" Buddha turned and calmly replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." Confused by Buddha's words, Angulimala asked, "What do you mean, monk? Explain yourself." Buddha responded, "I have stopped my mind from violence and cruelty. I live in peace and compassion. But you, Angulimala, you have not stopped. You are still driven by violence and hatred." These words pierced through Angulimala's fury and confusion. In that moment, he experienced a profound realization. The relentless pursuit of violence had brought him nothing but suffering and emptiness. He saw the truth in Buddha's words and felt deep remorse for his actions. Overcome with guilt and sorrow, Angulimala threw down his weapons and fell at Buddha's feet, begging for forgiveness. Buddha, with infinite compassion, accepted his repentance and invited him to join the Sangha, the community of monks. The story of Anathapindika. In the ancient city of Savatthi, there lived a wealthy and kind-hearted merchant named Anathapindika. His real name was Siddhartha, but he was widely known as Anathapindika, meaning feeder of the poor, due to his immense generosity and commitment to helping those in need. Anathapindika had heard about the Buddha and his profound teachings from a relative. Intrigued and deeply moved, he decided to travel to Rajagaha to meet the Enlightened One. Upon arriving and hearing Buddha's teachings, Anathapindika was filled with joy and reverence. He became a devoted follower and sought to bring Buddha and his Sangha, the community of monks, to Savatthi. Determined to support the Buddha's mission, Anathapindika decided to provide a permanent residence for the Sangha. He found the perfect location, a beautiful park owned by Prince Jita. The prince, however, was not interested in selling the land. Undeterred, Anathapindika offered to cover the entire ground with gold coins in exchange for the park. Astonished by the merchant's determination and devotion, Prince Jita agreed. True to his word, Anathapindika covered the ground with gold coins, demonstrating his unwavering commitment. He then built a grand monastery, known as Jetavana Monastery, which became one of the most important centers for the Buddha and his disciples. The monastery provided a serene and supportive environment for meditation, teaching, and community gatherings. Anathapindika continued to support the Sangha throughout his life, offering food, clothing, and medical care to the monks. His generosity extended beyond material wealth. He also provided guidance and support to those seeking spiritual growth. His home became a place of refuge and learning for many. Despite his wealth, Anathapindika lived a life of simplicity and humility. He dedicated himself to the Dharma and practiced the teachings with sincerity. His unwavering faith and boundless generosity earned him deep respect and admiration from the Buddha and the entire community. As Anathapindika lay on his deathbed, Buddha visited him, offering words of comfort and encouragement. Anathapindika expressed his gratitude for the teachings and the opportunity to serve the Sangha. With a peaceful heart, he passed away, leaving behind a legacy of compassion, generosity, and unwavering devotion. The story of Devdatta. Devdatta was a cousin of Siddhartha Gautama, who would later become the Buddha. Born into a prominent family, Devdatta was ambitious and envious of Siddhartha's growing influence and popularity. His jealousy eventually drove him to seek power and recognition for himself, leading to a series of events that highlighted the dangers of unchecked ambition and envy. Initially, Devdatta was a follower of Buddha and even joined the monastic order. However, he grew increasingly dissatisfied with his position and the recognition given to Buddha. He was driven by a desire to surpass Siddhartha and claim leadership over the Sangha. One day, Devdatta approached Buddha with a proposal. He suggested that the monastic community adopt more severe ascetic practices, including stricter rules and disciplines. His intent was to create a schism within the Sangha, believing that such measures would attract followers and elevate his own status. Buddha, however, rejected his proposal, emphasizing the middle way, balanced and moderate practices, over extreme asceticism. Undeterred, Devdatta began to form his own faction, drawing away some of Buddha's followers with his promises of stricter practices and a more rigorous path to enlightenment. His efforts to undermine Buddha's teachings and leadership grew increasingly hostile. Devdatta even went so far as to try to harm Buddha directly. In one notorious attempt, Devdatta arranged for a huge boulder to roll down a hill and crush Buddha while he was walking in the forest. Fortunately, the boulder missed its target, and Buddha remained unharmed. Devdatta's attempts to harm Buddha were unsuccessful, but they further revealed his malicious intentions and disregard for the Dharma. Despite Devdatta's continuous attempts to disrupt the Sangha and harm Buddha, the enlightened one responded with patience and compassion. Buddha knew that Devdatta's actions stemmed from deep-seated jealousy and ambition, and he chose to respond with forgiveness rather than retaliation. Over time, Devdatta's actions led to his downfall. His faction dwindled as followers realized the sincerity and wisdom of Buddha's teachings compared to Devdatta's self-serving ambitions. Devdatta's inability to achieve his goals and the estrangement from the community eventually left him isolated and destitute. Her interactions with the monastic community and her unwavering support for their mission. Her exemplary actions earned her the admiration of both the Buddha and his disciples. Visakha became a symbol of faith, charity, and dedication, inspiring others to follow her lead. Her life demonstrated that true support for the Sangha goes beyond mere material contributions. It also involves a deep commitment to the teachings and a genuine desire to help others on the path to enlightenment. The story of Upali. Upali was a humble barber living in the city of Rajagaha. Despite his modest occupation and low social status, Upali was known for his kind nature and his genuine interest in spiritual matters. He often heard about the Buddha's teachings and was deeply inspired by the idea of enlightenment and liberation from suffering. One day, Upali decided to leave his life of service and join the Sangha. Although he faced ridicule and doubt from those who saw him as an ordinary barber, Upali was undeterred by the criticism. He was determined to pursue the path of spiritual awakening. When Upali approached the Buddha, he humbly expressed his desire to join the monastic community. Buddha welcomed him with warmth and acceptance, teaching him the Dharma with the same reverence he showed to all his followers. Upali devoted himself to the practice of meditation and the study of Buddha's teachings with great diligence and sincerity. As he delved deeper into the practice, Upali's dedication began to bear fruit. He applied himself to the teachings with unwavering focus and commitment, overcoming the challenges and doubts that came his way. His humility and perseverance earned him the respect of his fellow monks. Through his steadfast practice, Upali achieved a profound understanding of the Dharma and reached enlightenment. His realization demonstrated that spiritual awakening was not limited by social status or occupation. Upali's journey from a humble barber to an enlightened being became a powerful testament to the universality of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha and the Angry Elephant. In the city of Rajagaha, The Buddha was teaching his disciples when a powerful and enraged elephant named Nalajirai was deliberately sent by a hostile prince to attack him. Nalajirai was known for his violent nature, and the prince hoped the elephant would cause great harm to the Buddha and disrupt his teachings. As the elephant charged through the streets, creating panic and chaos, the Buddha remained calm and serene. When Nalajirai approached him, instead of fleeing or showing fear, the Buddha stood his ground. He focused on radiating feelings of loving kindness and compassion towards the raging beast. The Buddha's demeanor was so tranquil and filled with peaceful energy that Nalajirai, despite his fury, was deeply affected. The elephant gradually slowed his pace and then stopped altogether. The intense anger and aggression within him seemed to melt away in the presence of the Buddha's profound calm and loving kindness. The story of Gautama and the mustard seed. In a village, there lived a woman named Gautama who was deeply grieved by the death of her only child. Overwhelmed by her sorrow, she wandered from house to house, asking for medicine to bring her child back to life. One day, a kind-hearted neighbor directed her to the Buddha, who was known for his wisdom and ability to heal. Gautama approached the Buddha, pleading for a remedy that could restore her child to life. The Buddha, understanding her profound grief, said, "I can help you, but first, you must bring me a mustard seed from a household where no one has died." With hope in her heart, Gautama began her search. She went to each house in the village, explaining her need for a mustard seed. Although many were willing to help, every household she visited had experienced death, whether recently or in the past. She found no home untouched by loss. Gradually, Gautama came to realize the universality of death and suffering. Every household, regardless of wealth or status, had faced the loss of loved ones. Her search led her to understand that death and suffering were part of the human condition. With this newfound insight, Gautama returned to the Buddha. She acknowledged that she now understood the nature of suffering and accepted that her grief, though profound, was a shared human experience. The Buddha then taught her that by understanding and accepting the universality of death, she could find peace and alleviate her suffering. The story of the swan. When Siddhartha Gautama was a young prince living in the palace of Kapilavastu, he was known for his kindness and compassionate nature. One day, while strolling in the royal gardens, Siddhartha came across a wounded swan that had fallen from the sky. The bird was severely injured, with a broken wing and struggling to move. Siddhartha, moved by the sight of the suffering creature, gently picked it up and examined its injuries. Despite the bird's pain and distress, Siddhartha handled it with great care and tenderness. Seeing that the swan's wing was broken, Siddhartha took it to the palace physician. He requested that the physician tend to the bird's injuries and ensure it received the necessary care. The physician, impressed by the prince's compassion, treated the swan's wounds and ensured that it was given a comfortable place to recover. During the days that followed, Siddhartha visited the swan regularly, bringing it food and checking on its progress. His consistent care and attention eventually led to the bird's recovery. Once the swan had healed, Siddhartha, the power of patience. In a small village nestled at the foot of a mountain, there lived a humble farmer named Nanda. He worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, tending to his fields and caring for his crops. Despite his hard work, Nanda often found himself frustrated by the challenges he faced: unpredictable weather, pests, and poor soil. He felt overwhelmed and despaired that his efforts might be in vain. One day, Nanda heard that the Buddha was visiting a nearby village to give a teaching. Curious and desperate for guidance, Nanda decided to make the journey to seek wisdom. When he arrived, he joined the crowd gathered to listen to the Buddha's words. After the Buddha finished his teaching, Nanda approached him and poured out his heart, sharing his struggles and frustrations. The Buddha listened patiently and then smiled gently. "Nanda," the Buddha began, "let me tell you a story about the lotus flower." Nanda's curiosity was piqued, and he listened intently. In a pond filled with murky water, the Buddha continued, "There was a lotus seed buried deep in the mud. Despite the darkness and muck surrounding it, the seed began to grow. Slowly, it pushed its way upward, through the mud and murky water, striving for the light. It took time, but the lotus never gave up. It was patient and persistent, and eventually, it broke through the surface of the water and blossomed into a beautiful flower, untouched by the impurities below. The Buddha looked at Nanda and said, "Life is much like the journey of the lotus. We face difficulties and challenges, but with patience and perseverance, we can rise above them and achieve our goals." Nanda pondered the Buddha's words on his way back home. Inspired by the story of the lotus, he decided to approach his work with a new mindset. He realized that he needed to be patient and trust in the process, even when the results were not immediately visible. With renewed determination, Nanda continued to work his fields. He learned to adapt to the changing weather, found natural ways to protect his crops from pests, and enriched his soil with compost. Slowly but surely, his efforts began to bear fruit. His crops grew healthier and more abundant, and his farm flourished. Nanda's newfound patience extended beyond his work. He became more understanding and compassionate with his family and neighbors, fostering stronger relationships and a sense of community. His positive outlook and perseverance inspired others in the village to face their own challenges with patience and hope. Years later, Nanda's farm was one of the most prosperous in the region. People often asked him the secret to his success, and he would smile and share the story of the lotus flower, just as the Buddha had shared it with him. Nanda's life was a testament to the power of patience. Through his journey, he learned that while challenges are inevitable, it is our patience and perseverance that allow us to overcome them and blossom into our true potential. The courageous deer. In a lush forest near the foothills of the Himalayas, there lived a deer named Chandra. Chandra was gentle and graceful, admired by all the other animals for her beauty and kindness. However, she was also known for her timid nature, always fearful of the fierce tiger, Raja, who roamed the forest. Every day, Chandra lived in constant fear of encountering Raja. She would stay close to the herd, avoiding the deeper parts of the forest where the tiger was often seen. Her fear confined her, preventing her from exploring and enjoying the forest's beauty. One day, news spread that the Buddha had come to a nearby village to give teachings. The animals in the forest, curious about his wisdom, decided to go listen. Chandra, despite her fear, felt a strong desire to hear the Buddha's words and join the group. When they arrived, the Buddha was teaching about courage and overcoming fear. Chandra listened intently, her heart resonating with his words. After the teaching, she gathered her courage and approached the Buddha. "Great teacher," Chandra said, "I live in constant fear of the tiger, Raja. How can I overcome this fear and live my life freely?" The Buddha smiled kindly at Chandra and shared a story with her. In a dense forest much like this one, he began, there lived a deer who was constantly terrified of a tiger. One day, the deer realized that living in fear was no life at all. She decided to face her fear head-on. She learned about the tiger's habits and movements, understanding when it was safe to roam and when to be cautious. She also practiced running and leaping, honing her skills to escape if necessary. One morning, as she was grazing near the edge of the forest, she heard the tiger approaching. Instead of panicking, she remained calm and used her knowledge and skills. She swiftly moved to a safe spot, and the tiger, unable to catch her, moved on. From that day, the deer lived more freely, with a newfound confidence and courage. Chandra pondered the Buddha's story, understanding the message. "So, I must learn about my fear and face it with wisdom and preparation," she said. The Buddha nodded. "Indeed, Chandra, courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. By understanding your fear and preparing yourself, you can overcome it and live a more fulfilling life." Inspired by the Buddha's words, Chandra returned to the forest with a new resolve. She observed Raja's patterns, learning when and where it was safe to roam. She also practiced her speed and agility, becoming more confident in her abilities. One day, while grazing in a meadow, Chandra saw Raja in the distance. Instead of panicking, she remained calm and used her knowledge and skills to move to a safe area. The other animals watched in awe as Chandra gracefully navigated the forest, no longer paralyzed by fear. Chandra's courage and wisdom inspired the other animals. They too began to learn about their fears and faced them with preparation and confidence. The forest became a place of harmony, where the animals lived freely and bravely. Years later, Chandra was known as the courageous deer who transformed the forest with her bravery. She often shared the Buddhist teachings with the young animals, encouraging them to face their fears and live courageously. Chandra's life was a testament to the power of courage and wisdom. Through her journey, she learned that by understanding and preparing for our fears, we can overcome them and lead a life of freedom and fulfillment.
The generous king. In the prosperous kingdom of Kosala, there ruled a benevolent and wise king named Pasenadi. King Pasenadi was known for his wealth and power, but despite his material riches, he often felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction. He longed for true happiness and fulfillment, which seemed to elude him no matter how much he amassed. One day, King Pasenadi heard that the Buddha was visiting the city of Savatthi, which lay within his kingdom. Intrigued by the stories of the Buddha's wisdom, the king decided to seek his counsel. He traveled with his entourage to the Jetavana monastery, where the Buddha was residing. Upon meeting the Buddha, King Pasenadi expressed his discontent. "Great teacher," he said, "I have wealth, power, and all the luxuries one could desire, yet I do not feel truly happy. What must I do to find genuine happiness?" The Buddha listened with compassion and then began to tell a story. Once, in a land far away, there was a king named Mahendra, who was very much like you, Pasenadi. King Mahendra was wealthy and powerful, but he too felt an emptiness in his heart. One day, a wise sage visited his kingdom. King Mahendra sought the sage's advice on how to attain true happiness. The sage told King Mahendra that true happiness does not come from accumulating wealth or power, but from generosity and compassion. He advised the king to start giving to those in need, to help his people, and to be a benevolent ruler who cares for the welfare of all. King Pasenadi listened intently, curious about what happened next. King Mahendra took the sage's advice to heart. He began to distribute his wealth among the poor, built schools and hospitals, and ensured that everyone in his kingdom had enough to eat. He treated his subjects with kindness and respect. Over time, King Mahendra noticed a profound change within himself. The more he gave, the happier he became. His kingdom flourished, and he was loved by his people. King Mahendra found true happiness not in what he possessed, but in what he gave. The Buddha looked at King Pasenadi and said, "True happiness comes from selfless giving and compassion. When we give freely and help others, we find fulfillment and joy that no material wealth can provide." Inspired by the Buddha's words and the story of King Mahendra, King Pasenadi decided to embrace generosity. He started by opening the royal granaries to feed the hungry and distributing his wealth among the needy. He built schools, hospitals, and shelters, ensuring that his people had access to education, healthcare, and a safe place to live. King Pasenadi also made it a point to personally visit his subjects, listening to their concerns and addressing their needs. He became a king who was deeply loved and respected by his people. As he continued his acts of generosity, King Pasenadi felt a profound transformation within himself. The emptiness he once felt was replaced by a deep sense of contentment and joy. He realized that the true wealth he had gained was not in gold or jewels, but in the happiness and well-being of his people. Word of King Pasenadi's generosity spread far and wide, and his kingdom became known as a place of prosperity and compassion. Other rulers sought his advice, and he shared the wisdom he had learned from the Buddha, that true happiness lies in giving and helping others. King Pasenadi's reign became a golden era of peace and prosperity, and his legacy of generosity and compassion endured long after his time. The story of the generous king who found true happiness through selfless giving became a cherished tale in the annals of history, inspiring generations to come. Through the teachings of the Buddha and his own acts of kindness, King Pasenadi discovered that the greatest treasure of all is the joy that comes from giving and the fulfillment that arises from a compassionate heart. The determined student. Ananda, one of the closest disciples of the Buddha, was known for his dedication and eagerness to learn. Despite his devotion, there was a particular teaching of the Buddha that he found exceptionally challenging to grasp. This teaching involved deep meditation practices and the understanding of profound truths about the nature of existence. Ananda tried repeatedly to comprehend these teachings but found himself falling short each time. Frustrated and disheartened, he approached the Buddha and expressed his struggles. The Buddha listened patiently and then shared a story with Ananda. Underscore 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 underscore. The story of the water pot. There was once a young man who wanted to fill a large water pot. He went to the well and drew water, but each time he poured the water into the pot, it seemed to evaporate. He grew frustrated, thinking he would never be able to fill the pot. However, he did not give up. Day after day, he continued his efforts, drawing water and pouring it into the pot. One day, as he poured water into the pot, he noticed that the water level was slowly rising. With renewed determination, he continued his efforts. Eventually, the pot was filled to the brim. The Buddha explained to Ananda that understanding complex teachings is like filling the water pot. It requires consistent effort and perseverance. Each attempt, each moment of practice, contributes to the gradual accumulation of wisdom and understanding. Encouraged by the Buddha's words, Ananda renewed his efforts with greater determination. He dedicated himself to his meditation practice, patiently and persistently working through his challenges. Over time, his persistence paid off. He experienced a profound realization, gaining a deeper understanding of the teachings that had eluded him. Ananda's journey demonstrated that determination and perseverance are crucial on the path to enlightenment. His story became an inspiration to other disciples, showing that with steadfast effort and unwavering commitment, even the most challenging obstacles can be overcome. The forgiveness of Buddha. Once upon a time, Buddha visited with his disciples in a remote village. The news of his arrival drew many villagers seeking his blessings. Among them was a businessman who was furious with Buddha. He believed Buddha was wasting the villagers' time by merely meditating with the villagers, especially his children. Instead, he thought his children should be helping him in his business to make more money. Driven by anger, the businessman approached Buddha and slapped him. To everyone's surprise, Buddha responded with a calm smile. His disciples and the villagers were outraged, but they controlled their emotions. The businessman, still seething, left the place. That night, he couldn't sleep. The image of Buddha's smiling face haunted him. For the first time, he had encountered someone who remained composed even after being insulted. The next day, he returned to Buddha, fell at his feet, and begged for forgiveness. Buddha's reply surprised everyone. "I cannot forgive you." The disciples and villagers were shocked. After all, Buddha had always been compassionate and accepting. But then he explained, "Why should I forgive you when you haven't done anything wrong? The person you slapped is no longer here. If I ever meet that person, I will ask them to forgive you." And so, the businessman learned a valuable lesson about forgiveness and emotional control from the Enlightened One. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching my YouTube video. Thank you and have a nice day.